Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Rachel. I lead the marketing team here at Valorum Reply that's helping to support today's event. So before we get started, just wanted to welcome you all to today's event for discussing the modern developer experience platform and tooling. We have a few subject matter experts here from Valorum and Microsoft to help guide you guys through it. But before we get started, just a few notes. We will be recording today's session, as you probably saw when you logged in. We will send that recording to the email that you used to register. So if you're forwarded today's event and would like to have a link to that recording, if you'll just email us, we can be sure you're on that distribution list. We'll put an email in the chat. Speaking of chat, it will be available throughout the event. We encourage you to drop in any questions that arise throughout the presentation. We have dedicated time at the end of the webinar to answer those questions with Jeff and Christina. For those of you who may be new to Valorum events, I'll just give you a quick bio. We're part of a global reply network, highly specialized technology practitioners. We're a prioritized Microsoft Cloud Solutions partner across all 6 solution areas, including infrastructure and app innovation. And we have deep expertise and advanced specializations across the Microsoft product suite. We provide end-to-end strategy, architecture, deployment, and change management solutions to help you get the most out of your cloud investments. On to our presenters. We're really excited to have with us today Christina Denny from Microsoft. Christina is a certified Power Platform developer and an Azure AI engineer with over 15 years of technology sector expertise. In her role as a senior Azure application innovation specialist with Microsoft, she focuses on modernizing the developer platforms and facilitating the adoption and development of cutting-edge AI tools like GitHub Copilot that we will be talking about today. You'll also hear from Valorum Reply's App Innovation and Enterprise Platform Manager, Jeff Delazin. Jeff has over 18 years of developer, solution architect, and consulting experience. In his role as leader of our infrastructure and app innovation practice, Jeff helps customers map their business needs and opportunities to custom cloud solutions that will solve challenges and enable innovation. So we're excited to talk with you all today about our vision for the modern developer experience. First, Christina will share the obstacles and opportunities in developer productivity that some of you may be facing today. And then Jeff will walk you through some of the modern tools like DevBox, deployment environments, and GitHub Copilot with a few real-world use cases to help demonstrate them in action. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Christina.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. Very excited to be talking about this very topic. It's very near and dear to my heart as it aligns to the role in what I do at Microsoft today. So I work very closely with developers in our manufacturing vertical. And I can tell you that this particular topic is becoming something that most organizations are wanting to discuss, from top leadership all the way down to dev orgs. And so I first wanted to kind of start with why this is important and why you should really care about this. And it really kind of comes down to, especially right now, every industry is being disrupted with digital experiences and software capabilities, either by native startups, or digital transformation from industry leaders. And a new bar has been set for customer experiences by those with tighter digital feedback loops. And what this means is those that have the tighter digital feedback loops, they're able to ship faster, experiment and learn faster, to innovate and improve experiences faster. And this is what is driving, innovation. And this is what all companies, even non-traditional software developer companies that don't ship software today, are thinking about. So that is why this is important. And so the demand is much higher for companies to be faster to market. And so they're looking at things like investing in tool chains, culture, processes, and making developer teams more productive, and leveraging existing software components either through open source, source, or AI developer services. So if you can go to the next slide. So what this means is, and I'm sure all of you that are attending today understand, like, software development is changing. If you looked at software development 20 years ago, it was very different, right? Things have become more complex. The pressure to put out changes is ever increasing. And then you layer in all of the, excitement around generative AI. Everyone wants to know, how can we do more with less and do it faster, right? So this is where we have, a point of view, and kind of we have looked at how our own software development has changed over the years. And I have some stats here that you have up on the screen that speak to some of those changes, right? And one of the best ways for organizations to become more innovative and efficient is by implementing DevOps and AI, and these are the stats to support it, right? Because at the end of the day, platform engineering is DevOps done right, right? If we think of it like that. And I'm just going to pause here just to kind of let these kind of sink in a little bit. But a couple of things to highlight. 94% of organizations that adopt platform engineering or advanced DevOps principles help them realize all of the things that we talked about in the last slide. They're able to get out code faster. They're able to keep up with all the changes with Gen AI. And those organizations that implement those changes are 1.6 times more likely to exceed their organizational goals and security earlier in the software cycle. So if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So that really, brings us to why prioritizing developer productivity helps us achieve, right, some of these initiatives. And, it's not, the developer journey is not, as streamlined as it could be, which is probably why all of you are attending today to kind of learn more. And there's a lot of common pain points that we see across the market. And if you want to just go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of those hurdles that help us to get to those productivity gains that we all want to see. By the way, raise a hand. How many of you can identify with the fact that the tool sprawl is a huge issue, or the time spent on onboarding is a massive drain? The fact that, and I hear this a lot, the fact that siloed teams and projects make it really hard to have inner sourcing within an organization. So you really have independent Scrum teams doing their own thing. And security and increased risk, is an issue that we're constantly facing. And all of these things together, create a very expensive ecosystem of tools and processes, which is what we're trying to get away from. So these are some of the hurdles, significant ones that we've identified, some that Microsoft ourselves have gone through, and where we're seeing the biggest transformation happening within our customers. And if you want to go to the next slide. So I want you to kind of think about and now imagine, if you will, merging kind of some of the most, beloved coding and collaboration tools that you're familiar with, like GitHub, Visual Studio, and Azure, to give you a seamless end-to-end next-gen application process. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, is how do we bring all of the tools, all of the processes, all of the people and the culture into this modernized developer experience to help you achieve all of the things that are, pressing upon your organizations today. Move to the next slide, please. And that's really where the power of the Microsoft stack comes into play. And that's where Jeff, in a couple of minutes here, is going to dive into some of these solutions that you see on this slide. But we're really going to talk about how the Microsoft stack in particular helps to enable 4 outcomes. So unleashing developer productivity, satisfaction, and creativity with the power of AI. So think GitHub Copilot, optimizing workflows and boosting collaboration, securing what matters, and unlocking a complete tool chain that saves time. Okay, so that I'm going to pause right there and I'm going to hand it over to Jeff. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look, we're going to take apart this stack and kind of Jeff is going to elaborate a little bit more on why you should care about modernizing the experience for your developers and how to do it with some of these tools.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah, let's start off at the basics and let's just talk about what developer experience means. So it's not one thing, it's a collection of tools, processes, and environments that all developers use in their daily work. It's something that changes from day to day. And what we're trying to do is we're aiming to enhance productivity and the ease of use with the overall job satisfaction, leading to more efficient and effective software development cycles. It's not like I said, one thing. It's your IDE. It's the way that you interact with source control. It's the way that you give feedback to your peers. It's the combination of the way that you're able to develop and test features and get them out to production. So I think generally it may be a little ambiguous or clear, but I think we know when we're talking about any individual thing what developer experience is referring to. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so why should you care about developer experience or even treating this as a topic? It's you've had developers for years, you've been working with development organizations for years, and I think that we're coming to some critical realizations that this is a time when we've really clarified the impact that developer experience has and what platform engineering does for your organization. It's starting to gain mainstream traction as a go-to framework or set of thoughts that can actually enhance your engineering team. And I think that we know intuitively that if the experience is better, you're going to have better talent applying and staying with your organization. But I think there's some other effects that may not be as clear, but that are certainly true. And that's that you will be robust to economic downturns. We've seen that companies that have better DORA metrics, better DevOps metrics, actually go down, they actually slow down less than the economy in general. And when the economy is not in a downturn, they grow faster. I think that should probably be the headline. We also know that changes are faster to be implemented and led to production. Customers are more highly pleased with the products that they get, and the iteration cycles are faster. Let's go to the next slide. So this is all these things I'm talking about have been true for a long time. It's just now that we're starting to actually see a set of tools from Microsoft that we think actually package and give you the flexibility to start implementing these. It's probably similar to other times in engineering when we've seen massive changes that have kind of separated organizations into old and new. It may be when we first introduced, or similar other times, maybe when we introduced DevOps, lean manufacturing, total quality management. Something like this kind of real shift in the way that organizations view productivity and view quality. And so whenever we have shifts like this, I think that there's an opportunity to be an early adopter. Everyone will go through the process of trying and adapting the methodology to their organization, and that's just the nature of change. But organizations that don't embrace this shift fully may not survive long enough or may not have the opportunity to make the adaptations in their market. Let's go ahead and proceed to the next slide. So I think that there's these three tools, DevBox, deployment environments, and GitHub Copilot, that I want to go a little bit deeper in. I want to take you through the three of these in kind of reverse order of how well known they are. GitHub Copilot's very well known. You've probably read a lot about it. You probably are using it, but the other two are not as well known, but they're extremely powerful tools Each of these will standardize the governance and security of how you create and release products. They'll accelerate your time to market, and they'll help you start to get feedback faster. And when you actually compare companies to less experienced dev experience focused companies, the state of the art team that's actually focused on this and has an intentional plan can release, iterate, and get feedback 2 to 3 days. That's 16 to 24 times approximately before you actually get your first release out. Let's go to the next slide and start talking about 3 different tools and 3 different stories. So if we go ahead and proceed to the next slide, we can see that there are different metrics on how long it takes a financial services company to set up a developer laptop. We see a renewable energy company saying 3 days. To get the needed infrastructure, it's approximately 15 days or 7 days. And I actually think that those are very optimistic results. I'm on a current project where the onboarding time is absolutely horrendous. It's over a month, and that's if you can get the right people to help you at the right time. So let's go to the next slide and actually talk about how DevBox starts solving these problems. So these are the steps that I've had to go through numerous times to onboard to any project. And it's really demotivating and demoralizing when you're really excited to access a project and you start joining stand-ups, and then you go to actually implement some work or to implement a change, and it's this long and winding road to actually becoming productive. So normally you prepare the corporate laptop, blah, blah, blah. You start to pull up your systems, and you realize, okay, the passwords I don't have access to, the resources to actually use these tools are slightly nuanced from how they're represented on the internet, and then I've got to actually go and find people that are using this daily. And how would I actually start becoming productive? And for platform engineers, I think the DevBox streamlines the development workflows. It enables customized project-specific dev boxes. Let's go to the next slide, and let me kind of explain how deployment environments enhance this tool chain. So it's fine. You can go to the next slide. So I recently was in an organization where we had over 300 virtual machines set up for 200 engineers. There was an entire team dedicated to setting up these virtualized test environments. Some of them were old, some of them were variations on dev, QA, permutations for features. That doesn't include all the extra VMs that we had for quarterly hackathons. It doesn't include the lack of infrastructure as code. And so it was really a struggle to maintain and to have some grasp and control over how you set up deployment environments. And I think Azure deployment environments answers this very, very easily. It enables the DevOps teams and your developers to create on-demand Azure environments by using the reusable infrastructure as code templates. And every time you release code, it creates a sandboxed environment to these infrastructure as code settings, and then it allows you to spin up and then spin down as needed. If we go to the next slide, I think it's the critical part is, next slide. These environments are created for test and development as needed. You get feedback and then you spin them down. It means you don't have a consistently up scenario where every time you need a slight tweak to your environment, you've got to actually set up a new VM. You have to set up a new Azure instance. This allows you to maintain and to deploy a pre-configured environment for any stage of the development cycle. You would spin up the sandbox environment to explore new Azure services, and you would create a new environments as needed with a few simple steps. Let's go to the next slide and talk about, I think, the way that this infrastructure as code catalog would work. So it's attached to your repository, and as you go through Dev Center, it maps to the current developer environments, and then every time that they go to test, they are immediately spun up, and then after you finish working on them, they're spun down as per configuration. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So I think if we talk about Copilot, I think it's the one that everyone has heard of. We've seen huge adoption early on. I approved everyone on my teams that if they wanted to try it, that I would pay for it and they could start using it. Let's go to the next slide. I think that my timing was correct and my eagerness to approach it was absolutely spot on. But I don't know how well I prepared my team for this. I know that we see these great stats at 55% faster coding and more fulfillment on the job, and that's absolutely true for anybody that turns it on. But as I started exploring it, what does the role of a co-pilot as a team member look like, and what were we using it for? Would I actually mandate this? I had some less receptive team members who had some resistance to using it. I'm not sure what their fear was rooted in, but I do know that it was real, and I needed to overcome their concerns. So let's go to the next slide. How much training would I need, and would this actually help my dev team members complete their tasks? So how would I know if it were working? How would I know if it were not working? And how would I be measuring that? So I think if I tell you, absolutely, it gets you to code faster. It means that refactoring is faster, code generation's faster, and initially starting out much better. Let's go to the next slide. So the way that I think that it's obvious that we think about Copilot is as a pair programmer, an expert system, a code interpreter. And I think it's probably the most tantalizing. You turn it on and it's ready to go. I've seen that you get more impact and you have less code churn when you've actually turned on Copilot with clarified rollout surveys, dedicated guidance, and you have the most additional impact for people that are senior. I think as I see junior devs making large jumps from topics that they've never heard of to topics that they're familiar with, you see them able to bridge that gap more quickly. So I guess the question is, why not just turn these tools on and start using them? DevBox to create dedicated developer environments that are standardized and secured, available on demand, deployment environments to spin up test environments, and Copilot as a pair programmer. And I can tell you what I've seen is that when we started training large organizations on Copilot, we held 1 to 2 day prompt navigation and GitHub Copilot training. We learned from the start that there were certain truths to being successful with these tools. You need to understand what they are good at and what they're not great at. If you try to apply them to situations where it's going to take more time for your organization to learn, it may not be that useful. I think that there's clear guidance that we were able to develop around learning how much time per prompt a senior engineer should take versus a junior engineer. And then how do you incorporate Copilot into your testing and code coverage life cycles? I think this absolutely changes the amount of coverage that you can get for unit tests very quickly. It's making sure that that code is quality, where I think that there's some additional time that you need to spend evaluating the output it's giving you. And then learning where it could be trusted and where we weren't certain about the outcome. And then finally adjusting our expectations to fit in line with this new pair programmer. So it's not just turning it on, it's turning it on intentionally. And I think that it's revolutionary assistance that the introduction and ongoing measurements are vital to actually capturing and adjusting to prevent code churn. Let's go to the next slide. So how would you actually do this? What does it actually mean to implement these tools? So I think that there's a necessary pilot team that you need to select. We've done this with a couple of Fortune 500 companies where we were actually planned their rollout of Copilot and other tools. And then we start to actually measure through surveys to collect and share the results. There's quite a number of metrics that are known as flow metrics, or metrics that can be measured from your GitHub repository that I think are absolutely critical, such as coding days, rework, commits per days. And I think it's very important to focus on legacy refactor, and that's any code that would update or edit code that's older than 3 weeks. So you may see people going through and using Copilot to go try to optimize old solutions. And that's obviously something I think that the novelty wears off. Uh, there's different ways that you can measure that additionally as new work for brand new code that doesn't replace code, and then productive throughput where it's any code that's not reworked and sticks around longer than 3 weeks. But I have seen quite a bit of churn initially, and that's where some of the intentional rollout and implementation would make sure that your team's successful from the beginning. I think that there's an additional capacity to have training in office hours where we've seen lots of more successful companies adopt Copilot. I think that what we've seen is senior resources are able to benefit very incrementally from it, and junior resources hugely. And I think you can actually make sure that both cohorts have generally the same benefit, but the senior resource is going to know more about the program, and it's going to take longer for them to craft their prompts and to look through the output and actually make adaptations and adjustments to that code. So I think if we ensure these tools are being used properly, I think that the next step is to roll out this cascade of benefits so that you can start to iterate on these results. So let's go to the next slide. So this is what it looks like to roll out and to actually use specifically Copilot and some of the benefits that we've seen. We've seen enormous amounts of time saving, up to a quarter, velocity boost in terms of increased test coverage, defect reduction, and really a sense of satisfaction in the job that lots of resources would do better with a pair programmer given to them or working with somebody. I know that that's true for me, that I always was fastest and most in tune with my work when I had somebody working with me. But the unfortunate part about it, even though there's many studies to indicate that it's not true, it is using two resources to essentially accomplish the task that you would normally assume that one person could accomplish. Now, we know that that's more than made up for with quality, but what if you didn't have to actually make that compromise and you were able to give every single person a pair programmer? And that's what we see with monitoring and providing office hours and surveying developers as we increased Copilot usage. I think there's a lot of downstream metrics that show that developers are working better with Copilot when it's been intentionally released. Let's go to the next slide. These are some of the offerings that we have. I'm gone through a couple of scenarios where we have already performed these GitHub Copilot Masterclass where they've gone over a day, 2 days, even 3 days when we break up the session times. It seems that it would be very simple, and it is simple. That's how I started using it. I just turned it on and started coding with it and asking questions. I did find that after I sat with it for a while, I was a little unsure if it was giving me the right advice. And that's where we see our GitHub Copilot Masterclass really improve your outcomes. Now, I think that there's a larger, better way to actually start to implement this in your organization. And like I said, it's teams that start to grab this proverbial bull by the horns and start to actually develop internal development platforms that have a packaged usage of DevBox to standardizing how their developers get onboarded, how their developers try new ideas, how their developers spin up their environments. And it is amazing the amount of toil or frustration that it reduces in being able to say, you're on the team, here's your new development environment. It's the same one that we're all using. And that's it. It may be difficult to put yourselves back in the shoes of a developer that's trying to set up that environment, but it can completely change the dynamic of how quickly you get resources onboarded and how quickly those same resources are able to jump and help their coworkers. And that's where I see this developer experience workshop as necessary. So we can split up the time with starting with DevBox. We would move on to deployment environments. So that's in addition to your testing team. I think that beyond that, there are further items such as the intentional use of GitHub Copilot, and then how do we use test data management to supplement or make it or accelerate the time to market for testing new changes. I think that anytime that you can set up load testing or test data as needed on demand, it is a huge benefit to not have to think of when was this test data last released and how do I know that it's the right test data. So those are a couple of weeks. Those are a week to 2 weeks. Our developer experience implementation and optimization really go a bit further, and they start helping you implement surveys on your team. They actually set the standard and the dashboards that you will use to review developer experience in your organization from that point on. We've also had companies implement ring releases through this program, feature flags everywhere. 100% of code that goes out behind your feature flag, and these are game-changing adjustments and simply start to reduce defects to production, mean time to recovery. Both of these are dramatically changed by that. And then finally, the optimization, where we plot where you are and actually start moving forward. So let's go to the next slide. So I think that what I'm offering right now is a free hour consultation. We can definitely go deeper on any one of these 3 topics or start at another point where your organization is. I think that we know that it's not only useful to just get a clarity on where your organization is, but it's useful to get a clarity on what your competitors are doing. If I can tell you that within automaking, your biggest competitors are 2 quarters ahead of you, I can also give you the guidance to help you bridge that gap. I can help you understand how do you get custom environments up and running? How do you start changing what your developers are doing? And how do we do this within the next 2 weeks? It's not something that needs to, it'll take months and quarters to get great at it, but you've got to start somewhere, and we can absolutely make a measurable difference in a couple of weeks, even if that's just shortening your onboarding. It's not only useful to that. So this hour consultation, we would start and explain to you, what do you want to do with developer experience? Do you understand what the major tools are and what you're measuring? And then I think from that point, we could actually go into probably the Copilot masterclass or setting up DevBox in a proof of concept and showing your developers how to actually start using deployment environments. I think these are all useful tasks. Any one of them could be accomplished very quickly. I think that it's measuring the output that we could definitely help you with. Let's go to the next slide. Is that it?
That's it. Yeah. If anybody has any questions they want to throw into chat for Christina or Jeff, now would be the time. Be happy to answer any questions you guys have thought of along the way. While we give everybody a little bit of time, I want to thank Christina and Jeff for their time, and note that in the chat we did put a link to our developer compass that Jeff was showcasing earlier. If you'd like to learn more about that, just fill out the form on that page. We'd be happy to set you up with a consult. While we give everybody a few more minutes, Jeff and Christina, we could chat through some common questions that we hear from customers. First, assuming a customer is already using these 3 tools, what would you suggest as the next step for enhancing the developer experience?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, the whole point of this wasn't just turn these tools on. That's certainly something I would encourage people to do. I would encourage everybody to go turn them on. It wouldn't be the end of your journey, though. I think that the next steps are ensuring these tools are being used properly, starting to survey your audience and making sure the right thing, and by right thing, I mean, what are the successful practices that your most successful teams are doing? How do you test code? How do you reproduce what your most valuable and productive developers are doing? And then you make that the obvious thing with the internal developer platform. One idea would be to find your top performers and start copying the way that they've set up their local workstation through DevBox. I don't think that would hurt anybody. I think that there's a real chance that that would make a measurable improvement, assuming that it's not completely idiosyncratic. And then I think deployment environments, why would that be so impactful, beyond turning it on? And that's because the environment starts to get standardized and you're able to get feedback from your tests more quickly. So every time I make a change and I put something into, or I put in a pull request, it needs to be deployed, load tested, and QA'd, whether that's from the developer or from an actual assigned resource. I think that deployment environments speed this process up and standardize it so that you always know what environment what the baseline is that you're testing on. When I was talking about the organization that I was at that had about 200 developers and 300 virtual machines, it was just a constant, I don't know, graveyard, and it was always a problem to ensure, okay, which VM did you test it on? Do I have access to that VM? Okay, if I do have access, what were the assumptions we're making? And all of that just goes away once you've standardized it, its infrastructure as code. And I think finally, Copilot, it is something that you should turn on. When I said that I thought that my timing was correct for giving everybody access to it, absolutely, I wouldn't change that decision. If I had spent more time thinking about anytime that you've got a tool that changes the way that people interact so all the time, I don't know, just ubiquity, uh, ubiquitous change. I think that it makes sense to step back and actually elevate your conversation to being intentional about how are you releasing this? What can you expect from it? What can you expect it not to do well? So I think that's probably what I would say the next step is.
And just to add to that, I think just from what I'm seeing from the Microsoft lens, especially when it comes to Copilot, is the disconnect between senior leadership and some of the developer orgs, in that they leadership saying, hey, we're going to invest and pay for GitHub Copilot. That's awesome. We're going to get these huge productivity returns. And the first thing you say is, hey, first of all, do you have a baseline? How are you measuring today? And then how are you articulating back what's realistic, and how are you attacking the change management piece of it, to actually get that adoption that you're looking for, and then be able to measure those productivity gains and what they actually look like. So for example, yes, you can unleash GitHub Copilot on your entire org. The more developers you have, the harder it's going to be to get everyone to use it, right? So I've worked with organizations with 200 developers up to like 20,000. And so understanding how you're going to evangelize it, how you're going to measure success, how you're going to implement it and get that culture change, to be able to adopt tools like GitHub Copilot, and then how to manage the expectations that are coming from your top line business leadership that maybe don't understand software development, or in particular, how generative AI tools like Copilot are actually going to help with productivity and what that means in real terms. So those are kind of the call outs that I have, and just what I've seen over the past 6 months, as more organizations deploy GitHub Copilot to their developer communities.
All right, great. Thank you, guys. I think another common question we run into is around measuring the developer experience. Are there any critical metrics that could be used to evaluate the full developer experience?
Yeah, I give you a couple. I mentioned a few of these earlier. It's easy to just go raw throughput and see that GitHub Copilot would improve that. I don't think that that's necessarily what you want to do. I think what you could measure is time to first PR. That's the time between when somebody starts a project and when they're able to get their first pull request. And we see other organizations measure first through 10th PR and then taking that average. Additionally, I do think it's important to keep an eye on legacy refactor. And then you really want productive throughput, and that's being able to look and see how much code that is not additional rework that sticks around longer than 3 weeks, and at which point it's considered a new feature if you go back into it. Additionally, the code explainability with GitHub Copilot, I think it should improve your involvement. That's the percentage of pull requests that the reviewer participated in, because they're able to understand more code outside of their narrowly scoped area. And then finally, thoroughly reviewed pull requests. That's the percentage of pull requests that have at least one regular non-trivial comment. I think Copilot can help all of those. I think that DevBox will obviously get you to your first PR through 10th PR much faster, weeks faster for most organizations. I think that those are ways, and those translate very easily to business impact. I think that's what Christina was talking about, that there may be a disconnect. I think if you can see that you're able to adjust and release new features more quickly, I think that speaks to leadership very obviously. And it's as well as quality. I would think both of those speak to business impact very, very easily.
Spot on, 100% agree. And that's it. And that's what we're seeing as well, right? And it's evolving. And I think it's the call out there is, that's what we're seeing right now. How we measure outcomes and metrics in this space is going to evolve over time, right? As new features and as we figure out how to leverage the power of Gen AI in the development process, I think there'll be more to come from that.
Awesome. Okay, last chance. Anybody got any questions? We can cover off on one more topic we get asked about. What is it's specific to DevBox, and the question is DevBox only useful to shorten the onboarding time?
Right. So it's definitely useful for that, but not only that. I think the ability to have custom environments per task, per person. It happens every day that somebody asks me a question. And if I'm able to jump and start up their environment to actually start working in that, or if I need to debug something, or if I need to install a new SDK for my environment, it helps me to do that with a measure of quality, so that I'm not just polluting my environment and trying things in my local machine, which probably is going to lead to rework or unknown bugs someplace else. I think it standardizes that. It does shorten the onboarding, but it helps me think more clearly. I have a kind of mental hesitation when I'm actually installing something on my local environment, even if it's in a virtual machine, because it takes so much time to set that up and to get it working, that if I've got an online development environment that I know is clean, that I'm able to pull up, and I know that it's standard to the problem that somebody's working on, and it works across squads, really standardizes security tasks. So I feel like it changes my everyday work. I feel like it makes things cleaner. It gives me greater authority when I'm testing something, and it helps me understand that what I'm working towards, I'm actually fighting with the problem and not just my environment. It's terrible to have to work on a problem and think that you've accomplished it when really you've only fixed your local machine. That's it may give you some insight into how poorly your machine was set up, but it's not productive for the entire enterprise.
So what Jeff is saying is it reduces the chair kind of sword wars that happen, while you're waiting for your code to compile or your thing to load up. It's all that time that's being wasted, and interrupts the flow as well, right? I think that's also, which is a huge thing because you get distracted and then it's just time that's getting taken out to be more productive.
Yeah, that Christina, that's really important. And I think that something I wanted to emphasize is that this flow state, however you define it, it's when you're feeling most productive. There is, like I said, it was demoralizing to be excited to join a team and then to take weeks to get onboarded and to actually start making effective contributions to the team. The flow state, however you get there within a day, is protected with these environments. I feel like it's a state of mind, and I've never been more effective and efficient than when I was in a flow state. And when I use DevBox, it actually protects that. I don't have to worry about custom uh, tools that I've got on my workstation interfering with my work, and I don't have to worry if what I'm doing is actually addressing the problem that I'm trying to solve. So I think that these guardrails that it puts around your environment actually keep me in flow state longer.
Which leads to typically having a good day, right?
Yeah, better day.
Yeah, better day. And I'll put it in the chat, but if any of you are familiar with Dr. Nicole Forsgren, who's part of our Microsoft research, one of the founders of Dora and Space Metrics, she actually did a research called the Good Day Project. Jeff, I'm not sure if you've heard of that one, that actually it is a way to measure, right, your developers, what they think a good day looks like in their world, right? And a lot of the things that we just talked about, that flow state, and those type of things impact what a good day looks like for a developer. So it's a very interesting study, and I think it links back to some of these solutions that Microsoft has come out with our stack to encourage more good days.
Who doesn't need a good day?
Everyone needs a good day.
Well, speaking of good days, that's the end of
Yeah.
our presentation today. It doesn't look like we had any questions submitted, so we'll give everybody a little bit of time back to go have a good day. Thank you for joining us. We will be sending out the recording, as I mentioned, tomorrow. So look forward to seeing you guys on our next event. Thank you, Jeff and Christina, for the time. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.